Harley Quinn has been a fan favorite character for women and men of all ages since she debuted in Batman the Animated Series way back in 1992. One look at any comic book convention floor will tell you she's easily one of the most popular characters to cosplay in fandom, but Harley's history, choices, and morals make her challenging. Is it wrong for fans to love a character like Harley Quinn? Whether you see her as a dangerous criminal or a, dangerous anti-hero, we wanted to talk with someone in the mental health field about the black, the white, and all of the gray in between about fandom's love for Harley Quinn.
Hi, my name is Dr. Drea Letamendi. I'm a clinical psychologist, writer for Fandom, and host of the podcast, The Arkham Sessions.
Let's jump right into it. Is our fandom around Harley Quinn healthy?
Psychotics have needs, you know. We have needs.
Harley is a pop culture phenomenon. It's really interesting that a character who is problematic can be so popular.
I'm known to be quite vexing.
We care about her, and yet we know that she represents all these kind of problematic and difficult ideas. One of those ideas, of course, is her relationship with the Joker and the clear understanding that he's abusive toward her. Whether it's the animated series or Suicide Squad, any iteration of her, we've seen a pretty long-standing narrative of the two of them in an unhealthy relationship. We can feel adoration toward her, we can feel connection to her, we can even feel like we're like her, and yet hold the idea too that she's made some decisions that are unhealthy and that she's a victim of another character who is never really punished for the ways in which he's abused her. Certainly, I think it's possible that we want to see her grow from this, and we're kind of rooting for her. So there's this idea that she will overcome some of the darkness, right? And another piece of this too is just being okay with something that's this complicated. If we look at similar ways in which we're complicated, in which we've made mistakes, I think that we can begin to understand why a character like this is one that we can accept. I think there's dimensions about Harley that allow us to learn more about ourselves and the different components. Yes, how we're good and how we're healthy, but also how sometimes we're not healthy, we don't make good decisions, and we might be in a situation just like Harley.
So we're drawn to Harley because maybe we see a bit of ourselves in her, for better or worse? Is that a lot to put on a fictional character?
What the hell's wrong with you people?
We're bad guys. It's what we do.
So there's a concept called a parasocial relationship, and parasocial relationships are non-delusional connections that we have with fictional characters. We know full well that they're not real people, but nonetheless, we have this pretty deep emotional connection to the character. I think a lot of people have a parasocial relationship with Harley Quinn. The one element of that, of course, is that we can get rather close to her and feel pretty safe. That this is a character who can be straightforward about her abuse, who can be straightforward about her mental health, who can be in that space with us around some of these more difficult histories that allow us to learn a little bit more about our emotional well-being. One of the most helpful aspects of a character like Harley Quinn is that she gives us an opportunity to think about our own mental health and to examine our well-being and figure out why we might be the way we are.
While actors playing Harley change almost as often as her costume, what would you consider to be the most important characteristics that she brings to this parasocial relationship?
Who is Harley Quinn?
I think with a character like Harley, there are some core features that need to stay pretty consistent. Harley is Harley when she's playful, when she's humorous, when she's sort of lighthearted in the way that she relates to other people.
Love your perfume. What is that? The stench of death?
Underlying that is darkness there, that she's struggling to overcome her past, that she's wrestling with really intense emotions and triggers from previous experiences. And then how Harley looks, I think, might be something that we think about too, as far as her appearance, her seeming independence of her body, the seeming independence of her sensuality, and her ownership of herself. And I think that that's probably going to manifest in different ways. She absolutely finds ways to really demonstrate that self-fulfillment and that self-actualization that comes from within. But there will be times when that manifests as some kind of remnant or psychological impact from the way that she's been objectified. And I think that's fairly accurate or common, that when we have experiences ourselves of being objectified, we then replay that out in how we dress, and how we talk to other people and relate to other people, in how we look. And so as we see this kind of ebb and flow, as we see this manifest differently with Harley, I think we could start to examine how her outward appearance is some kind of representation of what's happening within.
Without sounding too hyperbolic or dramatic, the idea of having that sort of relationship with a character not in charge of her own destiny seems challenging. After all, her choices are made by the people writing her. Do they have some responsibility in keeping that relationship in mind?
Own that. Own it!
So what happens when Harley's glamorized, in that she's presented as kind of an anti-hero, but also the figure to adore, the figure to watch and follow? I do think it's important to ask what happens when this connection to her, this intense fandom, this adoration of her is so widespread, especially coupled with her relationship with the Joker. I do think it's important to think about how that presentation of a character could impact the way that we address sexual assault survivors, the way that we address women who are or have been in relationships that have victimized them.
Anyone who can put up with Mr. J deserves a break.
And I do find it problematic to glamorize that situation and to create a hero with a clear connection to victimhood. I do find it, though, to be helpful to be a part of that dialogue, for all of us to be open to the kinds of conversations that come from that. It's not necessarily in my interest to correct or police or even try to censor what creatives want to portray, what they have to say about some of these characters, but rather to pull us into the room and have conversations and dialogue about what those connections mean.
It's so fascinating that creative shifts can impact our outlook on the characters so strongly. One take on Harley can be a fan's anchor, and the next take, they're loudly proclaiming, "Not my Harley."
There will be people that really want her to stay that early version of who she was. She was always in relation to somebody else.
A Harley Quinn's role is to serve. No one gives two shits who we are beyond that.
So in seeing a narrative where she's in control and she's actually directing and in power of her decision making and her own story, it will be different for people.
And if you've picked up that Dr. Drea feels pretty strongly about Dr. Quinzel, you're not wrong.
I have a really strong affinity toward Harley Quinn. I really, really connect with her. I've connected with her for like 30 years, right? So I do find that personally, I have to kind of wrestle with what that means. How do I find a character so lovable and yet understand that she's a representation of victimhood? And how can I then examine that relationship and what I feel toward her as a way for me to then reconcile the nuances of that victimhood? If anything, I hope that there's benefit to more dialogue about that and to different portrayals of this character, which we do have in various iterations, especially in the comic books and in the new animated show, where she's able to kind of separate herself and overcome her history of trauma.
It's a complicated issue for a complicated character, and while no two experiences with following her adventures will be alike, ultimately, is it okay to connect with Harley Quinn?
Guys, come on, give me a little credit here.
I think it's okay to give ourselves permission to to be a fan of Harley. She's just so present in pop culture. She really finds a way to get under our skin, and I really like that about her. I think that that's particularly useful or effective as a way for us to kind of get into some feelings that are important for us to examine in ourselves. It's a hard and sometimes really heavy space to be in, but I really appreciate that she exists. I appreciate that she's there for us to share our own experiences together and to be able to have like a continued dialogue about this.
While Harley's highs and lows may be a bit more extreme than ours, it doesn't make ours any less valid. In fact, as she navigates both her past and the chaos of her life, Harley can help us feel safe to make sense of our own, even if we can't always hit our own trauma with an oversized mallet.